We've talked about the draft a lot on this show and on this channel, but today I wanted help, right? I wanted somebody else to come on and help me do this thing. So I'm going to bring in an expert here, Jake Burns from the OBR. Jake, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been wondering about this draft in particular is you have two position groups that you feel like you're going to have a good chance to get a player that you want and a player that you need, well, in a need that you have on the roster at wide receiver and defensive tackle, right? I think we can all agree that there's probably going to be a player there or two that would, one, be worth that 44 pick, so you're not reaching into be at a desirable position.
Mhm.
My question has been, do you go at defensive tackle there or prioritize defensive tackle there and give them the tiebreaker just because you feel more confident at 44 with the defensive tackle you could get versus what you could get at 78 or 99 when it comes to a wide receiver? What are your thoughts and what's your mindset going into that pick there, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it because I think there's some stuff surrounding the depth of positions and how they value them that I think we're still kind of guessing about, right? Like we think they value defensive tackle, but we haven't really seen Andrew Berry invest heavily in that position yet. They really have not. They spot gapped a guy, two guys last year, both Malik's, McDowell and Jackson, cheap players, won a reclamation project. They spent a late draft pick on Tommy Togiai. Other than that, the latest pick that, or the latest signing or pick that we've seen that have mattered has been a Jordan Elliott pick in the third round. And before that, this wasn't even Andrew Berry, but that was the Sheldon Richardson deal. So we haven't really seen Andrew Berry invest in that position. We have that talk, Quincy, all the time about how they value linebackers and things like that. Maybe they don't value that. It seems we have evidence with the JOK decision that they value that a little bit more. We're kind of guessing about what they think about defensive tackle. There are still some things to be decided. As you know, Clowney signed on the 14th of last year. They could still make plenty of things happen in this 2.5 week window before they go into the draft. And I think we all expect them to do that, to make some move, maybe Akeem Hicks or Eddie Goldman, or there's some names out there that I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think when you look at the draft, specifically defensive tackle, you start to pinpoint that like pick 30-ish to pick 50-ish window, right? That's where it seems like guys like Travis Jones from Connecticut, Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma, guys that I've also loved, Logan Hall from Houston, Cameron Thomas, San Diego State, among some others. DeMarvin Leal is kind of in that range window too. You start with Logan and Leal to sort of be hybrid, maybe better odd front players than even front players, but you really start to get in a range there from 30 to 50 where it gets tight quick. Once Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis go, the two Georgia defensive tackles, it really starts to feel like, this is a tough position to gather. If we want to maximize getting somebody, that pick 44 is in a really sweet spot to get a guy that could be at least expected to be an impactful player for the next few years. So I think I'm with you. I think wide receiver is clearly a deeper position. They have, at least on the roster, some playable wide receivers. Right now, you're talking about on the roster. Tommy Togiai, I didn't like what I saw last year. He needs to develop like crazy. Jordan Elliott has been consistently poor in his time in Cleveland. And it's like, Sheldon Day, I don't know. What are you looking at? It's really an embarrassing position right now. So we have to, as we sit here recording this on April 12th, consider the fact that this is a dire need, right? There's a dire need. So yeah, I think pick 44 for me, given that they maybe bring back Clowney or go sign a Jerry Hughes or somebody along that edge opposite Miles, is a position that right now it's not even NFL level to start with. So that we got to think they're going to look at 44. And as you just said, that position to me screams the 30 to 50 range where pick 44 makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and one of the things I've been talking about for a while here, like one of the criticisms that I've had, I guess if you can call it that, of Andrew Berry has been the duct tape solutions at defensive tackle for the last couple of years, right? You bring in a 1-year deal, another 1-year deal, and I think he did that in the hopes that Jordan Elliott was going to come along at some point, and it never happened with Jordan Elliott. At least it hasn't happened yet, right? Maybe he can become that guy this year, fingers crossed, but we're pretty confident in what we've seen in Jordan Elliott, that he is what he is at that point. And I think you hit on something that's really clean. They haven't spent a premium pick or a premium contract on that position. And I don't know whether it's that they don't value that position, or could it be that they just didn't value who was available at those positions? Because the last 2 years of defensive tackle classes have been like there's two guys maybe in the top 15 or top 20, and then there's nothing else after that kind of situation. So we'll find out, right? This is a lot like the linebacking situation with JOK, where everybody was swearing up and down. Andrew Berry will never do this or value a linebacker in the first 2 rounds, and then all of a sudden we're trading up to take JOK. So maybe it's one of those situations. I would find it difficult to pass up on defensive tackle at 44, especially when you can address wide receiver, especially because you have paid a quarterback $50 million. You're assuming he's going to elevate the wide receiving play at some point, right? You have Myles Garrett there who can elevate guys to a point, but if you don't have people next to him, we know how ridiculous those schemes can be towards just focusing on Myles and how effective that can be at times.
And how much it hurts your linebackers. Keeping your linebackers free is an imperative thing for a defensive tackle. So, a lot of people talk about, hey, how do they pass rush, which is fine. I mean, I think Perion Winfrey is a great example of this. That guy hasn't given a crap about the run game his entire Oklahoma career. He's a pass rusher. That's fine. But can you eat up some people and keep your linebackers relatively free? So that's a lot of it too. Not just getting home to the quarterback. I'm a believer, as I know a lot of people are, that these days your defensive tackle should play the run on their way to getting after the quarterback, right? Like that should be their goal, is to get pressure in modern football. But you do have to anchor your run fit. You got to anchor your run fit, and you got to be able to absorb double teams. Your linebackers like JOK can roam. So it's still important. I mean, I think like the Band-Aid approach you're talking about, Quincy, spot on, man. Like they have tried to get by. We still have not seen them figure out how to get by this offseason. We haven't even seen a Malik Jackson signing. We've seen nothing. So we need them to paint the picture here for us at some point, because right now we're definitely honed in on pick 44 and at the minimum pick 78, because you don't even have, the wide receiver room's got DPJ, who's got NFL experience, and Mari Cooper's a very good player. That's it. I mean, like defensive end, you got Chase Winovich, playable. You don't really have much playable going on at defensive tackle. So it's all eyes on that position for a lot of us right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to get 2 out of here, right? Maybe like 1 in the second and then dip around and take somebody in the 5th here. But yeah, I think there's a sweet spot though with these defensive tackles, because I don't think you really want to spend 3rd-round picks on these guys after that, because they're all going to be gone unless like Travis Jones is still hanging around there or something like that, which I don't find likely. You're looking at like John Ridgeway, right? And I did not like what I saw out of him, or Neil Farrell in the Senior Bowl, or was it Tyreek Smith too out of Florida is one of those guys, right? It's I just didn't like. Outside, there's Logan Hall, there's Perion, there's Travis Jones, there's those guys that we've been talking about for a while there, the Senior Bowl group. And then there were other guys who were far less impressive. Haskell Garrett's a guy that's interesting, but the age might be a little bit of a concern there when it comes to the guardrails that Barry and company have to these things. And it looks like he's dropping. He might be available there in the 5th, so I don't know if they have those same strict guardrails there. What do you think of some of these defensive tackles? Who do you think is probably going to be who I would say this. Who's your favorite defensive tackle in this class, you personally? Mm-hmm. Who do you think is the guy that's most likely at the Browns draft in this class? And who do you think it makes the most sense for the Browns to take, if that's not the same thing as your favorite?
Yeah. So I think the 2 Georgia kids are special. I mean, I think Devonte Wyatt is a really good football player. The problem with Devonte Wyatt is he's 24. So that makes it, if Cleveland were still picking at 13, some people had pegged Devonte Wyatt there, and that's just outside the guardrails for what they do. I don't expect him. He's too good a football player to be there at 44. But if he was at 44, it could get interesting if they think they're in a win now window and think he could be a player. Jordan Davis is too freaky an athlete, too young. He's gone in the 1st round. One of the best combine testing numbers ever.
Oh my God.
He's fun. And people mistake, Quincy, it's funny. People mistake watching Georgia and thinking Jordan Davis couldn't get pressure on the quarterback, while not understanding that they were so deep along that defensive line that they would do different rotational subs just to get packages in there And it's not he couldn't. They just rotated people in and out. Those dudes were ridiculous at Georgia, man.
I don't think anybody realizes how ridiculous Georgia is. Like, I say this, and I'm not being facetious. I think this is honestly true. They have like 6 first-round picks on that defensive line, and 2 of them ain't even out yet, right? And then the one thing people don't realize, Jermaine Johnson is going to go like in the top 15, it seems like, this year, right? Like, that's where the hype has been for him. He's definitely a first-round pick now. He had to transfer
just to get on the field.
Yeah, just to get on the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, and he's a very talented player. So it's like, that's how deep Georgia was. Like, a dude like him that's a first-round pick was sitting there not being able to get time in that rotation. So when people focus in and try to hone in on, what was the production? What was this and that? Yeah, Travis Jones is going to have more production at UConn because he's the only dude like that at UConn. Everybody was like that. No, not everybody was quite like Jordan Davis. I mean, he had a broad jump that's further than Odell Beckham at 360 something. Like, it's something ridiculous. Just unreal, the type of athlete he is. And you talk about a guy who can help free up linebackers. I mean, at the very least, right, if he doesn't pan out to be a great pass rusher, which he has to do some work there and polishing his game, you know, that's a dude who's going to be able to free up some linebackers at the very least with this size, length, and strength. But, yeah, it's just, I think we won't understand that Georgia situation fully, like, as NFL fans, until it's like 10 years from now, and then it becomes like watching one of those old Georgia games. It's going to be like watching those old Miami games where you're like, everybody on that defense was going to the NFL.
Yeah, they're ridiculous, man. I mean, it's like Ohio State's wide receiver situation where Jamison Williams has to get out of there to even play, and then, that guy's pretty good. So it's wild. Yeah, they're so good, and everybody in the box. They're gonna have 2 linebackers taken pretty highly too. Like, it was ridiculous for Georgia. And there's Lewis Seen, the safety stud. That dude he might even be a first-round pick. Anyway, to your question, my favorite one in this class, probably of realistic range. And he might not even get to 44. He might not get out of the 30s. That's Travis Jones. I think Travis Jones is a Connecticut kid who Dane Brugler ranks as a first-round to second-round grade. I think that's about right. He's just really athletic, man. He's really athletic. His tape shows a guy who can blow up, stack, and shed. I think he's got really good athletic movements, good upper body strength. He can play with a lower pad level when he needs to. He gets a little high at times because he relies on athleticism, but he's got the traits at 22 that I still think can develop over 2 years. He can put a club rip together. He can put a swim move together to be a nice player. I think Jones can make a ton of sense in this defense as a 3-tech. And again, that's if we say Logan Hall is an edge. I love Logan Hall out of Houston. People think he might be a 3-tech. Brugler grades him as an edge. He's 6'6", 285, and he's a freak athlete. He's got a vicious spin or swim move that I think is going to do really well at the NFL level. So it depends where you want to grade Logan Hall. If you put him at edge, I think my favorite guy is probably Travis Jones at that point, but I like Logan Hall for the inside-out flexibility if he's available. The Houston kid just wrote him up a scouting report on him the other day. Needs to improve his pad level, play a little lower, but man, a nice power combination. Dana Holgerson at Houston said he's the best defensive tackle he's ever coached. I think he's a fun player, still on the young side at 22. He turns 22 just a couple days before the draft, I think on the 22nd. So really, really like his tape. Travis Jones makes sense, but I know you've been on Perion Winfrey, and a lot of people have talked about him. It depends. What we'll learn here with Winfrey is he's 21. He's 21. He's going to be 21 at the draft. He'll turn 22 over the summer. He's a freak of nature speed guy that I think if he adds a little bit to how he plays the run in terms of being able to hunker down, anchor, and play his run fit, when you pair that with some of the speed he plays with, I see NFL starter traits. He's going to get after the quarterback. He plays with ferocity. His Senior Bowl stuff was really, really strong. And again, the age at which he plays, I think, is really important for him. He's another guy who could do pad level lower at times. Again, when you're in college and you're a better athlete than all these guards and centers you're lined up as a D tackle, you just want to get past him as quick as you can. And I think that means a lot of guys stand up and use spin moves, swim moves, whatever. And that leads to some high pad level stuff that people tend to like overestimate. It's like, it's easier to teach. You could teach guys to play lower. That's the least of my problems. Does a guy have natural run feel? Does he have a natural ability to get after the quarterback? So I think Winfrey can make the most sense for Cleveland. Like I said, I know you've talked about him. We've talked about him on my pod. I know Jordan Reed at ESPN, who does as well as anybody covering the draft on the mainstream level. just mocked him to Cleveland at pick 44. He can make a ton of sense, man. The energy, powerful hands. He's, like I said, he's the youngest of this group. If you go look at the ages of them, he's the youngest of the upper level group right there with DeMarvin Leal. I just don't like DeMarvin Leal that much. I just inconsistent tape. He plays outside a lot. When he played inside his junior year at A&M, he got overwhelmed. He did not have a good feel for how to do it. So I would say most likely pick Perrion, and I'd be totally okay with it at that pick 44. Travis Jones, I think, is the best of the group as far as a complete player. I think Travis Jones, to me, is like a consistent Larry Ogunjobi. That's how I view him. A more consistent version of that player. And I also, Larry Ogunjobi, I might have missed this. I know he failed the physical in Chicago for that contract. Is he still floating out there? Like, is he going to get healthy? I'd be calling him, man, see what we could do here. But anyway, yeah, Jones is Jones, though, is interesting. He might be gone before Cleveland, but a good football player who will just be right around 22 and a half at draft time. So like those guys, a later round guy to keep your eye on, Matthew Butler, another guy who's 22. He's out of Tennessee, a big body, one tech guy. If they want a more interior shade zero type player who can play inside, anchor and A gap, do a nice job there, give you a sprinkle of pass rush as well. Kind of like maybe a 5th round guy. I think Matthew Butler from Tennessee is another name to keep your eye on.
Yeah, and the Browns, they haven't had a big size guy in a while there at that defensive tackle position. It might just be a philosophy thing, but the last 2 years especially, they have not had one of those guys. That's why I was one of the people that was saying the Browns, when they had that first-round pick this year, they should probably consider maybe going after Jordan Davis, because that would add something to that defense they haven't had. But let's move it to the offensive side of the ball. A lot of talk has been about wide receiver, right? Like, we've been talking about wide receiver, I think, since like week 8. What do you think is the sweet spot for this team to go after wide receiver? Like, where do you think is the time and opportunity to get the best value versus, and like a good wide receiver also with that, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say wide receiver is really deep, but wide receiver also can fall off a cliff after a certain point, right? If you look at who's on the board, the top 5 guys that are sitting there. So, for example, if you go defensive tackle, the first 4 guys, after 5 names, it's like 3rd round grades for Dane's guide. It goes 2nd and 3rd round grades all the way to 10 at wide receiver. John Mechie's the 11th ranked wide receiver at 21 years old. Alec Pierce, at number 12 on his board, is another 21-year-old about to turn 22 at the draft. Fantastic football player at 6'3", 211, can burn, 4.41 speed. Like, it's a deep wide receiver draft, but you really don't want to get caught in the wind in terms of not being able to get your guy. I think if the right guy is there at 44, and what I mean by the right guy, George Pickens, kid from Georgia, who's a big X receiver, 6'3", 195, start like real wide receiver 1 traits. If he can prove health and get there mentally, he's of interest at 44. If Jahan Dotson or Sky Moore are there at 44, and the Browns do address D tackle and DN before the draft, those guys are in play. Then you start to think about 78. That's where I think John Mechie, Alec Pierce start to become like realistic options. Khalil Shakir from Boise State. But if you go to 99, I think that to me, as we sit here, is the most realistic situation. Like Donovan Peoples-Jones, people are just kind of brushing to the side. We saw that guy get pretty good production out of Baker Mayfield, and we expect the quarterback play to be much better. I think that they're banking on DPJ being a nice player for them as an X. So you start to look at Cooper as your Z, and then you say, okay, well, we need a slot. A guy that nobody talks about, Kyle Phillips out of UCLA, 22 at the draft, slot player, 5'11", almost 6 foot even. He's not going to blow you away with the measurables, but I see like a version of Danny Amendola, Hunter Renfrow, that type of player, smooth route runner, nice catch radius, is just going to produce in the NFL. He's a nice player. He's got a 4th round grade from Dane. The Sports Info Solution guys give him about a 3rd, late 3rd, 4th round grade. Pick 99 and 118. Kyle Phillips makes sense if they need to address slot. They don't bring back Jarvis. Then there's other guys. Bo Melton, the kid out of Rutgers, who's a burner, a 4.34 guy who's going to be under 23 at the draft. He's of interest later on. Justin Ross, the Clemson product. I had Matt Waldman on my pod the other day, who just believes if Justin Ross, if everything is right physically for that young man, young 22 at the draft, everything is in front of him to be a nice football player to still make it work. And those are kind of the guys. I think your most realistic outcome right now is pick 78 or pick 99, but I could see them going down to pick 118 as well if they feel like the range of options are there. If you can go D tackle or D end of choice at 44, Quincy, and then somebody like John Mechie is sitting there, to me at pick 78, Mechie or Pierce, those are fun players, man. Mm-hmm. Like Mechie is a Z who can learn and develop under Cooper as he gets his ACL right. He's a smooth route runner. He's got a great release package off the line of scrimmage. He just was always overshadowed by big names around him. But he's a production machine at Alabama who was always open. They found him. He was always open. And Pierce, like I said, a typical X, man, a good route runner, vertical route tree, can run the post, can run those smoke takeoff routes and go up and get it over top of people, but can also create that late route development separation, which makes those guys downfield really good if they can get open in the second third of the route where you kind of stem late, or you got late hands, or you make that one little wiggle right before the ball arrives and create some separation. So Pierce is fun. He is a freak tester, man, a really, really good athlete. And I think he was a over 40-inch vertical to go with the 4.41 at 6'3", 211. So just listen, you know this. It's some great options at wide receiver if they want to go 78, 99, and then some guys like Melton and Phillips are the types that could be available. Romeo Doubs is another name available out of Nevada who's a nice football player there with Carson Strong that could be a late name. So a lot of fun. I think Dane put 48 wide receivers in his draft guide. You know, he gave draftable grades. This is how deep this class is in terms of sheer numbers of people because of the COVID year. It's just a ton of people in this draft. He gave draftable grades to 35 wide receivers in this class. That's an insane number of wide receivers. So it's deep, man. It's deep, and I think they can get a guy at a lot of different numbers. You get to 202, I'm kind of, you could maybe like a Tyquan Thornton, a 4.28 burner. Yeah, I could probably use that, but we'll see if that type of player's sitting there. But yeah, they could go late too.
Now, one of the things I want to touch on real quick is you mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones. Where do you think they're at with Anthony Schwartz? Because this is a guy that they were high on when they drafted him, right? They were surprised that they could get him where they did. But, I mean, inconsistent tape, to say the least, this last year. And I don't know. Some of that seemed like part of it was an issue with Baker. Mm-hmm. Him and Baker just could not figure it out together, which it seems to be a little bit of a threat with his ex-receivers. But because he was able to get more targets with Case Keenum. When Case Keenum was in there, he got like 3 targets each game. With Baker was in there, it was like a stretch of games, 8 games, where he got 1 target but like a normal snap count. So where do you think they're at with him? Do they think that those issues were more QB wide receiver relationship related, or do they think it's kind of a, hey, this dude's not going to be who he thought he's going to be?
Good question. I would chalk it up right now to they're giving everybody a fresh run here with Deshaun, and they want to see. There's some things about him, Schwartz, that you don't love. I did not think he played as fast as the testing numbers. Some guys play faster than testing numbers. I didn't think he played as fast as he tested. Now, could you see that change? Maybe, but I'm not, as I sit here today, I'm not positive he's ever going to be a dynamic, because he's a build-up. He's got to build up a little bit to it. And the guys who do best in the NFL are guys who are top speed right now, guys like 0 to 60 at the blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. So that your 60 mile per hour could be different guy to guy, but you get there quicker. If you're a 4.4 guy and you get there quicker than a 4.3 guy in terms of your top speed, it's a difference. It makes a difference. So I think those elements are still undefined to me. He does not track the football down the football field as well as I'd like him to. And what I mean by tracking it is it's in the air. You're trying to find the best route to get to the football, those little nuances like late hands or keeping your shoulders where they need to be aligned to give yourself a nice catch radius. I didn't love those things. I think with better quarterback play, though, he could get more comfortable and find a role. I would be stunned if they've given up on him. It's way too early to give up on him. And I'm not saying you indicated that at all, but I think that they're going to give him every opportunity to keep developing, keep trying to find a role, using him as a gadget player from the gun when they want to go with a high motion guy or a flat motion guy to catch those little flip passes. I think they'd be wise to incorporate him in some of that stuff. and give him some more chances, because late in the year, like you said, with Case Keenum, a guy who was willing to sit in the pocket and find the soft spot in zones, I thought he did show some stride. So the verdict is very out. I did not leave his rookie year feeling like, oh, I see what he's going to do in the NFL, right? You just want to get an idea for like, oh, this is how he's going to find success at the NFL level. He flashed this and this. It wasn't consistent yet, but I saw it. I didn't see anything yet. We'll give him this year. It's a very important year for a third round pick to show what they're going to do successfully at the NFL level. But new quarterback, I think the scheme is going to be altered, obviously, how they operate more from the gun and do some different RPO stuff. And he could find some success there, little now slants, drags, little quick flat route out of the gun. If he slides across in motion, snapped outside the tackle, they could run that little RPO now concept where they slide him to the flat. So there's some things where you could get the ball in his hands and let him run a little bit. And I think that he'll be better served with this quarterback than the last one, put it that way.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned about him was like how fast he plays, right? I'm looking at his 40 splits here, and when he was 98th percentile, obviously in that 40-yard dash, he ran like a 4.27, something ridiculous like that. But then his 20-yard splits like in the 60th, but his 10-yard split's pretty fine there at 81 percentile. So it's like, it's one of those things where you're just like, is it a separation thing with him? Is it just, is he still just learning the game of football and the nuances of that stuff? Because he wasn't a full-time football player for his whole time at Auburn, right? Like he got on a little bit late there, right? So he's really still learning it. But it's just one of those things where it's like, hey man, at some point either you got it or you don't, right? Like either you can get open or you can't. It's a skill, and some guys are super fast and can't.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me also to your point there, which is good. I as an overly confident guy either about what he can do on the football field yet. I think there's some of that he needs to still find success and build on that confidence and grow. But to sit here and say it's like, hey man, I can see how this guy's going to be a second contract player. I see how he's going to succeed. I don't really know yet, man. We got to figure it out this year to see if there's a niche at which he can be really good at. And if we figure that out a little bit, we can put odds on it. But right now it's like 40-60 that it's just not going to work out for him after his rookie year. But we'll see. They'll give him a chance.
Does it put him in a difficult spot that this draft class is loaded with guys who can run sub 4.4 and have on tape done better with the end arounds and the deep post that they want, that guy to do, right? Because that's what they want Anthony Schwartz to do, is some gadgets, be fast, take the top off of defense, and then we want to sometimes have you sneak across the middle deep when we do a bootleg or something like that, so you can get some free money basically, right? And there are guys in this draft class that are just like Alec Pierce is infinitely more. Well, you would have more confidence in him right now if you took him there at 78, just because you've seen him do that at Cincinnati, right? Even a guy like Christian Watson who has drop issues, right? He has like a 14% drop percentage or something like that. You've seen him do those things. Granted, at North Dakota State, it's not like he did in the SEC, but still, you've seen him do those things on tape. Even coming out of Auburn, we had concerns of like, hey, man, like we only really seen him eat off of certain like screenplays and not really do all the physical stuff that we want you to do at wide receiver. Not saying he's not willing or not capable. It's just there are guys in this draft class that if Anthony Schwartz were in this draft class, he probably would have been like a 5th or a 4th round pick. As ridiculous as that sounds for somebody who ran 4.27, it's shaping up to be that kind of a year where we're talking about John Mechie at 78, dog. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, It is. I got 11 guys here who ran sub 4.4 out of those what did I tell you? How many did he grade? 48 guys total, 35 draftable. There are 11 guys with sub 4.4 numbers. That's bananas. And then 19 guys in the 4.4s or 4.3s total. So speed is not an issue. This class is going to provide speed. You want a guy like Anthony Schwartz, bring him in, compete. Like this is how it goes though, man. You get into year 2. If you don't do much in year 1 and you go through year 2 and you struggle, it's not for long. This business is cutthroat. And if he doesn't prove to find a role or find something he can win at, that's what you have to do. If you're a middle round pick, you got to find something you can consistently do that gives value to your football team. And we saw him. He's not a returner. The return stuff is not there. They brought in Jakeem Grant because they did not believe anybody on this roster could return kicks or punts successfully. So, we've been through it. What are you going to do as a wide receiver? Can you find a Byron Pringle role? Can you find a a McCole Hardman role. Can you do that for them? If he can, then there's value, but you got to prove it, man. And I'm telling you, they're going to be shifting. This is a win now team. And if you can't provide something substantial to the win now operation, you're looking at a trade. I mean, they'll trade him, if they don't love what they see, they'll trade him early and try to maximize value or something or another, man. Like it's pressure's on to answer your question. Pressure is really on for him.
Yeah, definitely. It's pressure up for everybody. I mean, this team's been trying to win now for like 3 years now at this point. So, you're at that point to where you better win something at this point, right? Like you've committed enough. We have doubled down on the roster at this point by trading for Watson. You gotta do something. This is not going to be the year where somebody's going to be happy because we made the second round of the playoffs again, right? Like this is. People expect stuff, and they've been expecting stuff since 2019. So it's going to be interesting to see how this year goes out, how this draft goes down. Hey, look, the one good thing, Jake, is that me and you, as Browns draft guys, we got the next 3 Thursdays off, man. We don't have to worry about the first round for a little while, you know what I mean? So we can kick back and relax and fall in love with the Senior Bowl guys, and then that's all we really got to worry about. We don't have to worry about the junior that has all these boxes checked and that's gonna have this crazy pro date. That's not the life that we have to live for better or worse. So I don't know how you're planning on spending the next 3 Thursdays in April, that last week of April, but hey, I'll take the good with the bad there. No first round picks, sure. Day off is fine. But thank you for coming on, Jake.
Better quarterback. Yeah.
Appreciate you being here. Anything else you want to say before we go off?
No, man, nothing else going on. Nothing crazy going on in my world. Just like you said, all draft content all the time leading up to this thing. I'll be out in Vegas for the draft. Hopefully can get on site for a couple different things. But otherwise, man, keep on keeping on. A big fan of yours, man. Keep crushing it.
Definitely, man. Check him out. Jake Burns from the LBR. Also check them out on Twitch. They do Twitch streams a lot as well. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Y'all have a good day and have a great night.